Okay. I'm just expecting Michelle also. I'm not quite sure. And I record all the sessions as well because there's another one, Lydia, who's doing the course, but she's not available in the morning. And yeah, we've got, it should be an interesting process. So nice to have you here. I've just completed, well, we haven't completed it, but we've just done 6 days training over Zoom in Uganda. So that's kind of interesting to see how that's gone. And this has been an interesting contrast to be teaching in, to teaching here. So great, so welcome and nice to have you here. And we'll create some space. I'm really interested, because we've got a small group, we have a lot more chance to interact and to chat. And I'm very interested to know about your own ambitions with permaculture and what you hope to get from the course. So we'll talk about that very soon. I thought maybe just to break the ice, I'll do a few introductory thoughts and sort of get us going. So I like to offer a definition of permaculture right at the beginning to make it very clear. Some people think, erroneously, some people think that permaculture is a bit wishy-washy. It's a bit hard to define. It's a bit just a general mass of sort of ideas and stuff, which it really isn't actually. It's very precise. It's very specific, but also it's very adaptive, and it is not dogmatic. There aren't hard, fast sort of like rules, and that is because the world is complex and the world is constantly changing. So to create really hard, inflexible rules is just a way to trip up. So instead, this is my definition of permaculture. This is how I like to explain it. It's a design approach. It's a way of making decisions. It's a way of solving problems. It's a way of building consensus with other people, and it is based on a set of ethics, on a set of values. And right from the start, that differentiates permaculture from just about everything else. Certainly in the sort of monetary capitalist system, there are no ethics. There are rules that you have to behave within, but it's not, there isn't a deliberate intention to create certain outcomes. There's the assumption that the market is an efficient allocator of resources, and it'll always come up with the best way of doing things. Well, we have a lot of evidence to suggest that that's not the case. I think when we talk about climate change, I would say that is a failure of the market. It's a market externality that risks destroying everything. I mean, we're seeing what's happening in the west coast of America right now is utterly horrifying. And what's even more horrifying is we've been told for years and decades that it's coming, and somehow we haven't been able to maneuver ourselves anything like fast enough to respond to what we can see coming over the horizon. So now we're in almost emergency mode. So we really need to start thinking about that as well. And let's go back to our definition. And to a certain extent, quite a large extent, permaculture is a pattern language. I like to say, how do we make sense of complex things? How do we make sense of the fact that the world is so huge, big, complex, and constantly changing? And part of the answer of that is, well, we make generalizations. We try and see the patterns. Nature's full of patterns. The days of the week, the months of the year, the seasons, these are patterns. These are the way that which we navigate our way through a really big, complex, changing landscape. Okay, so the pattern of permaculture is the relationship between three things. Firstly, the ethics, and we'll unpack on what they are. And ethics, again, is also a really complex, is a difficult area, because nobody gets to tell you what your values are. That's for you to sort of decipher and decide for yourself. So again, in permaculture, we're not trying to impose things on people. In fact, I like to start off courses and training by saying, don't believe a word I say. I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. What I'm actually challenging you to do is to use your own powers of observation and to see whether we can draw similar conclusions. And it's only those things that we agree about, it's only those things that we can find a consensus about, that we want to sort of bring into our permaculture plan, because those are the things that we, if you like, that's the solid ground that we now have between us. So permaculture is all guided by ethics. And again, the way that I see ethics is it's your long-term navigation system. So I don't know quite where it's going to get me. I don't know where this is going to take me. But if I can stay within a set of values which are true to me, then I can be fairly confident it's going to take me to somewhere that I actually want to be. They say, there's a saying, isn't it, that the end justifies the means. That if you have something really good, long-term goal in mind, it doesn't matter what you do to get there. The point is that you get to your target. Well, I think that life tells us the opposite, is that the end is the sum total of the means that you use to get there. So if you kind of lie, cheat, and steal to trying to get to a good place, by the time you get there, you've lost yourself. So ethics is this. The permaculture ethics is this long-term steering mechanism to try and keep us within a range of behaviors that, if you like, we see as desirable. So if that's the steering mechanism, what are these other two elements? Well, permaculture is built on a set of principles. And those principles are derived from observing nature, from observing natural systems. So again, it's not something, it's something which we hope we can build consensus about. So natural principles include observations, stunning, important observations, such as water flows downhill everywhere, always, unless you add energy to make it go uphill again. That's a universal truth. And that's true whether you're a Christian or a Muslim, or a Sunni or a Shia, or a Protestant or a Catholic. Water flows downhill. We don't need to agree about those other things necessarily. I think religion's a campfire topic. Talk about it at the end of the day around the fire, you know. It's not the thing that we necessarily can all agree about. But we can agree about the fact that nature behaves in certain ways. Organic matter decays to compost. Plants grow towards the light. Solar energy is coming into the system and plants are trying to harvest that solar energy. We can observe that with our eyes. We don't need belief to agree about that. I can see Michelle is there as well. Hi, Michelle. We're just warming up. We're just getting going. And I'm giving a definition of permaculture. It's this relationship between ethics, this long-term steering mechanism, our values, our long-term goals, if you like. It's also a set of principles derived from observing nature, and we will explore those. Now, different permaculture teachers and whatever writers and whatever have structured these principles differently or made slightly different observations. And then the brilliant David Holmgren did an overview, looked really at everybody, at all of these different principles, and realized that in some ways people were overlapping things, saying things twice. And he simmered them down into 12 very strong, very easily sort of remembered ideas. So I like to use David Holmgren's 12 principles. It doesn't necessarily resonate with everybody. It's not permaculture itself, it's a way to understand permaculture and remember it. So 3 ethics, 12 principles, and then there's a set of design tools, because we're interested in permaculture design. It's not just an idea, it's not just a vague aspiration, we want to make changes in the world, and the tools, the design tools, are how we actualize it. So we don't get too lost in theory in permaculture. We learn by doing. We're really interested in applying ourselves to the real world, to the natural landscape, and by taking, by exploring and by sort of experimentation, if you like, we learn what works, and we learn what works for us, and we learn what works for us in our particular circumstance. Okay, so there's a definition of permaculture. It's a relationship between these three things: ethics, principles, and design tools. And it's very much about having a deliberate, conscious approach to how we relate to the natural world and how we relate to other people. Okay, so we can explore those ethics a bit, and maybe we can. I'm aware that I've just sort of started off just talking, and I really want to hear everybody else. So maybe I'll give a little bit more input to sort of warm us all up, and then we'll have a little bit of a go round and a chance for people to say something. So I hope that's okay with you. So I subtitled this, we all have values, but can we communicate exactly what they are? And by that, I mean something quite, I was thinking about something specific. There's definitely when I was younger, in my 20s, looking for something, trying to figure out how the hell do you make sense of this crazy world. And also I can say is, I studied sustainable development at university. I graduated in 1984, but all my interest in ecology and sustainable development goes back way further than that. I was born on a farm in Shropshire, and I grew up in a world of of plants and animals and people and growing food and stuff. And I had a childhood playing in the streams and climbing in trees and that sort of stuff. So I grew up playing in nature and observing nature without realizing that's what I was doing. So after I graduated in the mid-80s, and I worked on a development education project for a little while. And I felt that if I tried to define my own values, they were all negatives. I was anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-capitalist, maybe, or anti-pollution, So it made me think, what are you for? If you can't define, if you only define yourself by what you're not, that's not very powerful. It's not a very good way of being able to express yourself. So what's the opposite of being against all these bad things? What is it that you're for? What is the value are your values, and how can you communicate them? And coming across permaculture, that was the first thing that answered that question for me, was to be able to express values in a positive way. So this is how we look at it anyway in permaculture. And again, it's trying to expand on this idea that we're trying to be inclusive and not to create ways, I think there's some real shortcomings within the environment movement and the green movement in the ways as it's really quite judgmental. And we're also measuring ourselves by behaviors without necessarily understanding the conditions or the environment that people are growing up in. So if we're constantly judging people by going, well, what, you flew, you took that holiday, you drove here, you live in that big house, that's not very green. It's like we're setting this bar that then people have to jump this high before they can join the club. So permaculture is not a club. Permaculture is a direction. If you realize, no matter what your lifestyle, no matter what of an environmental villain you may or may have not been in your life, is permaculture is the realization that we're going to go in a different direction. And it's the question, it's the process of how we apply ourselves to do that. So we're not here to judge each other and to tell each other, oh, you're not good enough to join our club. But we are asking people to buy into these ethics. And I think it's not hard. And I think there's lots of ways in which we can have discussions with people to develop those ideas. So I'll start with this. So years ago, someone said this to me, it had an impact on me at the time, is if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. In other words, if we're not defined by our aspirations and ethics, then we're very easily pushed off track by what might feel like interesting or ideas that might be fairly baseless. And I think especially in our modern times, when there is so much disinformation, there's so much fake news, to use the term, but it's confusing because it's not 100% made up. This is how they confuse you. So they give you something that's a partial truth, and then use that, if you like, to push your thinking in a particular direction. Or people, we latch onto ideas because they reinforce what we want to think, rather than actually really trying to get to get to the bottom of things, understand things as they really are. And as I say, the real world is complex. And one way that we've responded to that is we've all retreated a little bit into our bunkers, into our little internet space, where we just receive information that we want to hear, and we filter out what we don't want. And I think, again, that's not very helpful. And that's how we've got, to a certain extent, into the mess that we're in. Okay, we're not alone in the world of permaculture. We all have, aspirations. We're not alone in this. So I think it's interesting to look at, if you like, values and aspirations that are coming from elsewhere. And especially within the context of doing international development work, but really across the board is, we should pay attention. It's interesting to visit the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. They're originally called the MDGs. They were the Millennium Development Goals. So this was framed already 20 years ago, 2000. And there are 17 SDGs. This is what we're all supposed to be working towards globally. And this is what's come, obviously, from, so it's the Joint Partners United Nations. It's basically an alliance of all of the humanitarian organizations, environmental organizations, to try and bring together, to cluster together and be specific about what their development goals are. And they're pretty awesome. I mean, it's very ambitious, but it's what you realize is that all of these things are connected. We can't have climate justice without social justice, etc. So number one, no poverty. Okay, we'll just do that then, shall we? That's an enormous challenge. To get rid of poverty, again, depending on how you define that, probably needs coming up with a whole new economic system, a whole new paradigm, a whole new way of behaving and allocating resources. But we won't reach our SDGs unless we can involve everyone in the process. So I think part of what no poverty means is it has to be inclusive. It has to be, to solve the problems of the world, to create positive change, we need to be able to find ways to involve everybody. Okay, zero hunger. To me, zero hunger and no poverty, they're kind of the same thing, aren't they? Eliminating hunger is part of eliminating poverty. Good health and well-being, well, to a certain extent, that comes under the same barrier to me as well, the same category. Quality education. Yeah, we all need to be able to read or write. Gender equality. Okay, that sits right there with no poverty. That's a huge ambition. But again, for an inclusive, empowering society, that's what we have to be aiming for. Clean water and sanitation, okay, that goes with the good health and well-being. You can't be healthy without clean water and sanitation. Affordable and clean energy. Okay, number 8 is a little bit controversial, and we're working on that one. Number 8, it says decent work and economic growth. Okay, I don't know about economic growth. I think we've come to the end of economic growth. That we don't need to expand the capacity of our economic systems. We need to reform our economic systems, very much so. So decent, meaningful work. Again, and that underpins no poverty, zero hunger, and good health. These are very, very related things. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Well, we obviously can't have decent work and we can't have, economic functionality without the infrastructure to underpin that. And but again, we should constantly be questioning ourselves about the kind of infrastructure that we're building. Do we really need to build more roads? Do we really need to build more, I don't know, concrete blocks? Because that's a lot of what's underpinning and driving climate change. So number 10, reduced inequalities. Well, for me, that sits with gender equality. If we are clear about gender equality and racial equality and cultural equality, religious equality, those things really all sit together. 11, sustainable cities and communities. I think the whole topic of urban permaculture is enormous and full of possibilities. I'm really excited about the idea of how we might transform urban landscapes and cityscapes, especially when you start changing the transport, you start pulling the cars out of the system, you're going to have a lot of space. Up to 2/3 of space in modern cities is given up to the car. Apparently there's 7 parking spaces for every individual car. Think about how much we could transform cities if we could find better forms of transport, human-powered forms of transport. They call it active transport, isn't it? Walking, cycling, small electric, I don't know, trolley buses and things like that to make it easy for people to get around in cities. 12, responsible consumption and production. So there's the infinity sign, that 8 on its side. Responsible, that means endlessly recycling. Well, cycling is a very important part within permaculture, one of our really key principles, something which we'll then be enlarging on. Climate action. Yeah, obviously we're in a climate crisis. How can we organize ourselves better? How can we coordinate action globally? Life below water. Everything that we put into watercourses ends up in the ocean. Water flows downhill, and so the oceans have become the repository of all of the unresolved things that happen on land. There's so much plastics going into the ocean, plastic beads and particles, for example. But also think about the enormous amount of agricultural runoff, the huge amounts of fertilizers, nitrates and things which are really changing watercourses. And we'll again go into this in a bit more detail on the course. But when you add nutrients to water, it robs the oxygen, which kills the fish. And this is something, again, is we're eutrophying, to use the correct word, the global watercourses. We're allowing too many nutrients to go into the water. And that's because we're using soluble, we're allowing sewage farms or agricultural residues and things like fertilizers to enter watercourses. If we're concerned about life below water, obviously we have to be concerned about life on land. What happens on the land impacts directly on watercourses. 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. None of this is any good as if we're fighting each other, or if we don't have the institutions and the structures to enable us ourselves to work together. So think about that, because also think about what kind of institutions we might need to create, maybe at a local level, community level, or national level, but what kind of institutions might we need to empower ourselves on this journey, to make ourselves more effective and to enable much more, participation across the community. 17, the 17th goal really is about building partnerships to achieve those goals. So again, is our Venn diagram here, overlapping communities. It's very important that we can all see how we're all working towards a common longer term objective. Even what you're really concerned about is, I don't know, bird conservation, or you're interested in I don't know, human aspects of this, challenging gender equality. There might be areas that are your speciality or issues that resonate with you the most, but the truth of it is all of these issues sit together. So there is no saving the birds without thinking about life underwater, or challenging poverty or gender equality. People are starving, they're going to eat the birds, so then you're not going to save them. All of these things interrelate. So again, hence the jigsaw puzzle. How they've tried to show how there's no idea sustainability means everything. It means addressing all of these different areas of human activity. So again, that's why permaculture tries to incorporate all of these ideas. So it's enormous. It's really enormous. It's really ambitious. And we're trying to create change globally. Okay. So this is how we explore the ethics idea. And I think this is an interesting way of doing it. We're going to build our Venn diagram now. And the first part of the Venn diagram, the first circle, is you, or me, oneself. So, and the most interesting and most important part of the whole universe, of course, is you. And why would we argue with that? Why would we want to try and make people not feel their own sort of self-importance, if you like? And your first objective, everybody's first objective, is to meet your own needs. Okay, and that's not selfish, that's self-empowering. A very simple example I like to use is, you know, if you've ever been on a jet plane, on an international flight, they always think that little health and safety brief at the beginning, don't they? And they say, in the unlikely event of the cabin depressurizing, an oxygen mask will descend in front of your face. Put your mask on first. Do not try and help your kids, your granny, the person behind you, until you've put your mask on. Because if you turn blue in the face and pass out, then someone else has got to save you. That's not selfish, that's self-empowering. So again, we can explore and think about, this is the question now, isn't it? Like, what's a need? There's a difference between a want and a need. The things that we might want, do we really need them? It's that great Rolling Stone song, isn't it? Sometimes you can't always get what you want. But you might just find you get what you need. So there's a difference between wants and needs. And your first objective as a permaculture designer, as a human being, as any entity, is to understand what your own needs are and to build strategies to meet them. Okay, and that's fine. Okay, so the first ethic in permaculture is around accepting the idea that we all have needs and that we're fully entitled to pursue fulfilling them in a way in which then we can empower ourselves to do whatever else it is we have to do. So the second ethic, the second set of ideas that come within this is about, well, if I accept that, or we can accept that the first entitlement is for us to pursue our personal needs, we also need to accept that that's what everybody else is doing too. As much as I'm trying to feed myself and compete to, you know, for space and air and whatever it is that I need, so are you, and so is everybody else. And the fact that we can recognize that mutuality, that we're both working towards the same sort of objective, is that shouldn't bring us into conflict. That should make us start to realize that perhaps there's ways we can collaborate, that maybe ways in which I can meet my needs in a way in which might help or support or certainly not compete with how you might meet your needs. So there's an interesting area is, can I start to make decisions that are good for me and help me to grow and develop, but in a way in which it also overlaps and harmonizes with your desire to grow and develop and to meet your needs. So can we be slightly more strategic and start to create, if not an overlap, but start to get closer to this area where we're finding and creating mutually beneficial relationships. Permaculture is one of the key things that we're thinking about within it is how to build and create mutually beneficial relationships. So I can meet my needs in a way in which in some way it might help or support you to achieve the same. Okay. So then, and the third, so there's one ethic's about the self. Second ethic is about other people and understanding things about other people. And the third ethic is to do with the natural world. It's part of a realization that we're part of a living system. We might not have fully recognized that or brought that on board into our understanding, but very much within permaculture, that's one of the things which we're really trying to educate people about is everything's a subset of the natural world. None of us could be here. The water we drink, the air we breathe, the food we eat, everything is a product of this natural living, breathing planet that we are on. So a question, as we evolve our consciousness, as we evolve our behaviors, our patterns, can we start to push our actions towards the direction that in meeting my needs, I'm helping others meet theirs, and that those processes are happening in a way in which is complementary and supportive of the natural world around us. There's an idea, I think, really, again, an erroneous idea, is that all we need to do, to be green, to be virtuous, you just have to be a little bit less damaging than everybody else. That somehow gives you some brownie points. Well, the realization is we've damaged the natural world so much, so badly, we've run down the natural capital so much that in fact, just being slightly less bad is not good enough. We actually have to be regenerative. We actually have to plant more trees than you consume, build more soil than you might be responsible for degrading, find ways in which we can make a greater contribution than what we take. And that, again, is our longer term journey, but we somehow have to get the whole planetary system, if you like, thinking and operating in that direction. So, wouldn't it be great, it's just like the bullseye of a target, wouldn't it be really great if every single action we did was good for me, good for you, and good for the planet? And it was like, if we hit the bullseye every time, it would be fantastic. But of course, life's complicated, life's more nuanced than that. And it's not always, there's always a cost. So we're always juggling and balancing these three objectives. So let's say, for example, I've been doing, the last few years, I've done a fair amount of work in East Africa, in Uganda mainly, and Kenya and Rwanda. And so that's me, I'm meeting my needs, I'm fulfilling my own ambitions, I'm learning things and growing as a person. Hopefully, I'm helping other people meet their needs because they're also learning and growing, and we're harmonizing together. And in some ways, I'm helping the natural world because I'm showing people how to plant trees and make compost and stuff. But 3 tons of carbon dioxide every time I jump on that plane. So there's a cost. So you could just say, oh, Steve, you're not really green after all. You think you're so, whatever. You could use that as a stick to hit me if you like. But instead, I'm trying to think about how I can balance these 3 things against each other. This is what I mean about not being too dogmatic. I want to minimize the amount of times I take international flights. When I do take one, I want to be as effective as I can and get the most value from that carbon expenditure. And also I'm setting up networks over there to replace me. So it doesn't require me to keep going out there. I'm training trainers and then showing them how to train other people. So if I can maybe minimize the amount of damage, if you like, of environmental costs that I'm causing through design, through planning, then I can maybe justify that carbon cost. Everything comes at a cost. So, and imagine that if we could slowly communicate this better and get more people to, the more people that start to think in this way, okay, you might not hit the bullseye of this dartboard every single time, but if everybody's actions start clustering in, oh look, I can, if your actions start moving in this direction, if your choices start moving in this direction, and if that starts to be for everybody, so instead of, okay, we don't hit the bullseye every time with every action, but increasingly we're hitting into these areas with the decisions, the design decisions, purchase decisions, actions that we're taking. There's a general maneuvering in this way. Remembering that some people's actions are right out here somewhere. They're not good for themselves, they're not good for other people, and they're not good for the planet. They're just bad things. And maybe that's because people haven't been educated, they have addictions, they have problems, they have all sorts of things, starting from a very difficult place. Some people are very damaged. But how can we create an inclusive way in which even actions or individuals who are way out on the margins can start to feel included and invited to you know, to be part of this process. So in some ways, I would say, I would like to propose that anyone, no matter where they're starting, if your actions are out here somewhere, but anyone who's starting to realize, permaculture, I never thought about that before. This is a new thing. We're part of a living, interconnected system. I'd only ever thought about myself as an individual before. Okay, so now you're beginning this journey towards operating within this ethical framework. And I would argue anyone who is on that pathway is doing permaculture. But we're not, as I say, not trying to, we're not trying to trip people up and judge people. We're trying to create something inclusive, this direction. So let's go back to then this idea first, is it all starts with me or you. And it's about meeting your needs so you don't pass out from lack of food and water. You are a subset of a wider society. None of us live in isolation. Sometimes we might want to, but we can't. Bill Mollison, who was the originator of permaculture. Well, that's okay. This is Bill's book. It's back to front, isn't it? Never mind. Sorry. It's called Permaculture, A Designer's Manual. And this was published in 1986, I believe. And it's kind of, I'm not going to say a permaculture Bible, that's the wrong way of putting it, but it's an incredible source book. Possibly the most important book to be written. Certainly, if we're going to stay on this planet and not destroy it, it's full of very, very, very important ideas and observations. So when Bill first started exploring permaculture, he said he was disgusted with the world. He was so let down by greed and pollution and the negatives that we all know of, that he went out into the bush. You can do that in Australia, and carved himself out a little bit of paradise in the bush, planted his first forest garden, and sat there feeling, you know, whatever. And very quickly he realized this isn't going to do it, is it? Me sitting in the bush with my little garden isn't going to create the effect that I want. So he realized he was going to have to go back and rejoin society and be a sort of a force for change. He said in his own words, he said, I wanted to fight negativity with positivity. I wanted to find a system that was all about solutions, resolving problems, and building alliances. So we see ourselves as a subset within society. We meet our own needs. We feed ourselves and clothe ourselves. But with the time and energy you have left over, you can spend that on getting to know your neighbors. You can spend the time and energy that you have left contributing to wider society in whatever way. Maybe you meet your own needs by having a job, and maybe you have some of the money left over that you earn. You can donate that to a charity. That's a way in which, if you like, you can start to see how you as an individual relate to the wider society. You might work part-time. You might have some spare time. You might go and work at the local food bank and donate some of your time. That's another way in which you are giving your surplus away to create a better society around you. And it's in your own interest to do that. You don't want to necessarily be surrounded by strangers who are, you know, going without. That's not going to create a very beneficial world. So we have this really key question in permaculture, which is, what do we do with surplus? And here's another way of thinking about it is, and obviously society sits within this natural world. So instead of perhaps looking at this Venn diagram, these overlapping circles, let's sit them one within the other, because as a person, we're a subset of society, and society is a subset of the environment. They're not equal. They actually balance differently. So, and if we erode, this is another thing which I think we've got very wrong, is there's this idea of, well, we all have to, you know, serve the economy. We have to make money. And with that money, we pay for, you know, essential services. And if there's some money left over, oh, we'll give that to the environment. And it's like, now, where do you think the money came from? Where do you think that value came from? It came from the natural world. So in fact, society translates value from the natural world and brings it to you. Whether it's your can of baked beans or the oats that you had for breakfast or whatever it is, it's come from the environment. It's translated by society to come to you, to allow you to meet your needs. Question. Imagine you are a homesteader growing your own vegetables. How many runner beans do you need? How many runner beans a year do you and your family need? Let's say it's 743. I don't really know, I haven't counted. So how do you grow 743 runner beans? Really hard to know. So what we do is we have a sense of what might be enough. We plant those plants. If we only get 650 runner beans, we have a deficit. We don't have enough runner beans. So in some ways, there's a shortfall. And we might better tough it out for a year or two, you know, tighten your belt kind of thing. But if it's not enough, ultimately, it's not sustainable. You're not sustainable in the longer term if you can't meet your own core needs first. And you have to really actually ask yourself, what are my needs? So if we can simplify our life, the target that we're setting is easier to reach. If you need to have 3 Mercedes parked outside on your drive before you feel happy, then you're going to have to work really, really hard to feed that. And you will never be sustainable until you can create a surplus. So whatever it was I said, 743 runner beans, it's impossible to do that. So what you do is you try and grow something in the right amount and you get 800, you get 1,000. In fact, if you get good at runner bean growing, you get an awful lot of them. So you meet your needs. You can only eat so many runner beans. We all get tired of them eventually. What do you do? So if there is no surplus, you're not sustainable in the long term. If you can create us a surplus, so you've eaten as many beans as you can, you're sick of the bloody things, well, you made runner bean wine, runner bean jam, runner bean chutney. What are you going to do with them? With the ones that are left over? It's obvious. You give them to your neighbor. You hand them over the fence and you use them to make friends. You use them to make new alliances, new partnerships. Okay, some things are even more exciting than runner beans. Imagine what else we might be able to produce. But there's a simple thing about, we have to meet our own needs, and then we can use the surplus to build community. And actually we can use the surplus to build the environment. We can compost them. We can make more soil. We can, once we've got into a position of surplus, we're in a position where we can now start to make positive changes in the world. So we're going to get down back to this me thing, and is to be really successful in permaculture, the first rule is this, is to begin to set limits to your own consumption. Don't be greedy. In fact, permaculture contains this really, really powerful idea, and it is this, that there is such a thing as enough. That's, you know, we live in this greed is good, consumption for its own sake kind of culture. If you have one car, that's okay, but if you've got 5, that's really cool, and you know, somehow having more is seen as a good thing. I don't think it is. And I think we have to, in setting limits to our own consumption, we can then create more surplus, which we can use to engineer, to build stronger communities, more interconnected communities, and we can put that surplus into the natural world and create a better world for everybody. Okay, so let's go back to the SDGs, and let's put them in the same pattern as what we're, again, pattern language. Let's put these ideas in the same pattern as what we've been looking at in terms of the ethics of permaculture. And some of them are economic ideas: sustainable production, equal society, economic opportunity, infrastructure. If you like, these are all things pertaining to economy. They're all things pertaining to how you meet your needs. I meet my needs by having a job and in being active in the economy, utilizing economic resources around me, and so forth, and by having access to the world of work. All of these are things relate to economic decisions, how we meet our needs. So we could say this central bit, the me bit, is something to do with economy. The second bit is obviously clearly about society, and that relates to the no hunger, health and welfare, gender equality, challenging poverty, all of those things. So if we can meet our needs individually in a useful way, then that helps society meet its needs in a more fair way. So this is the me, the society, and then the environment bit. Obviously, so in the SDGs, they talk about the biosphere, the living skin of planet Earth, the air and water that we swim around in. So obviously, it needs to be good for the land, good for the sea, whatever the other two are. I can't quite read them on the screen, but yeah, we know what they are. 6 was clean water and sanitation, and 13 climate action. Okay, so we also know, and I don't know if you come across the donut economics model as another way of thinking about economics. In some ways, it looks a bit like this. It's sitting ideas within them. But we are transgressing the limits of the biosphere right now because we're pouring so much pollution into the waters. We're eroding the forests and the soils, and we are failing on climate action or to act fast enough. So these environmental goals trump everything else. Maybe I shouldn't use that word. These environmental goals supersede everything else because there is no society in a devastated world, you know. And again, think of those poor people in California right now. Just the whole livelihood's just been instantly destroyed. I can't imagine what that must feel like. And I was speaking to some friends from Zimbabwe actually a few months ago, where in a region where they were hit by tropical storm Idai. It crossed Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe, and then went back out to the ocean again. It destroyed the third city of Mozambique, Beira. 90% of the city was destroyed. It also hit a community in Zimbabwe, a place where actually I used to live, a district called Chimanimani. And some of the people there told me, we don't know whether to rebuild our houses or not. Like, the storm was so bad, we've lost faith in the future. I mean, how terrifying is that? And imagine how many environmental disasters can you take before you just give up? So we're very much hitting the limits of the natural world, and this is the situation that we're in. Okay, moving on. So economy, society, biosphere. I hope I'm not over-laboring this, but I think it's really important. So let's take all the labels off and then just see the patterns. We know roughly what all these colors and segments mean, and we're thinking about how they sit inside each other. Okay, so this economic stuff is about me and how I meet my needs. Okay, what are my needs? What are your needs? It's worth going into this a little bit. This is the obviously Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a well-established, well-known sort of theory, and I can put this into a slightly different context as well. In that, in 2018, we did a 7-month project working with displaced people in northern Uganda. There were mainly people from South Sudan, and many of them had walked 200 miles through a swamp to get to safety, where there's a tribal conflict, civil war going on in South Sudan. It looks like an amazing country, I've got to say. It really, really does look like an amazing place, and I really hope they can find peace. And the potential there is enormous. Just such an incredible, beautiful place. But, you know, imagine being a refugee. Imagine walking away from your home with nothing, the clothes that you're wearing. So some of these guys had walked, I don't know, 200 miles through a swamp to get to Uganda. You arrive there with nothing. So you're at the very bottom of the pyramid. You're hungry, tired, scared, out of your culture, maybe don't have enough clothes to wear, all of those things. Nothing else matters. When you're in that state of physiological need, you're not in a place to help other people. You're not in a place to build long-term plans. You're not in a place to whatever, start thinking about how to change the world. You're in I'm cold, I'm frightened, I'm naked, I'm hungry, give me food, give me shelter. That trumps everything. It supersedes everything. So this bottom about what your needs are, we need to breathe like quite a lot regularly. We need to drink water. We need to eat food. We need sleep. We need warmth. We need rest. We need those basic needs. So in terms of what do we need, definitely the physiological needs come above everything else. And these are things we need to keep focus on and understand that this is true for everyone else. And if other people are not allowed to meet their needs, they'll become desperate and they will do things which could be destructive, and damaging. So let's think more about that. And then the second layer of the pyramid, which also is titled basic needs, is once we've eaten and we've got some warm, dry clothes on, and we've got somewhere to sleep, is we need to feel secure and we need to feel safe. And one way that we do that is we build alliances with other people. So again, is the second ethic about community. So we need some kind of stability, social, economic stability around us, for us to be able to start making longer term plans. What was very interesting and illuminating working in the refugee settlements was Uganda has told these people, they've told the South Sudanese, and where we went, there was 1.2 million people in a field, in the bush, 1.2 million people displaced by war. The Ugandan government said to them, you are welcome to stay. You can have an ID card. You can have a plot of land. You have the right to build a house, and you can get on with your life here. They get basic food aid. They get some of the purple layer given to them, and their chance then is to start to build longer term goals. And if we have a degree of safety and security, we can then begin to move into our psychological needs. We need a partner, or close friends, intimate relationships, possibility of starting families and kids, and feeling fulfilled and loved and included. And again, notice that a lot of these things are non-material. These are social things. These are the things that we actually need, more than we need a TV screen the size of our living room, or another car, or another holiday. We need those things which actually fulfill ourselves, empower ourselves in a way in which we can make longer term plans and which we can contribute in a bigger way. So the next layer, the fourth layer, is about esteem, prestige, feeling accomplishment. We have ambitions, we have skills, and the more we use them, the more we grow in confidence. So once I'm not starving and scared or feeling alone, and I've got a little bit of support structure around me, I can then start working on the next layer, which is about creating, accomplishing things, setting goals for myself or people around me. And this fifth layer is about self-fulfillment, self-actualization, achieving your full potential, including creative activities. Write that novel, paint that painting, design and plant that forest garden. These are long-term investments that we might want to make, which are a product of the knowledge and skills and esteem that we've built up for ourselves. So the things that are really resource-based are on the purple layer. That's the food and the water and the shelter and the basic transport and access to the things, to the things that give us access to higher up the pyramid. So it's an interesting way to think about what our needs might be and how we can prioritize them. Within the refugee settlements, we're very much focused on, moving people up the triangle, moving up the levels, so that they can very quickly start to take care of each other more and to rebuild a society, a community. And again, what was interesting was they gave us 40, we worked with 40 people our job was to train 40 refugees, and then to support each one of them to become a trainer, to identify and train 5 families. So we spent 2 weeks with them going through the same sort of curriculum I'm going to go with you. And then we sent them back into the refugee settlement and challenged them to initiate development, a demonstration, plots, and learn, sort of to incorporate permaculture ideas into their own activities, and then use that as a tool then to educate and to inspire the people around them. And that worked. It worked really well. It was a very, very interesting process. Anyway, I'll come back to that. So there's our ethics and SDGs. So, I've just got 1 second. Thank you. Sorry, the joys of working from home. It's the postman. Okay, so we talked about the first one was about me, how I meet my needs, and we thought about what needs are, other people and society, and then the natural world, air, soils, forests. Our ethics relate to these 3 layers. So this is how we memorize it. We have a very simple way of memorizing it, is earth care. The stuff about the natural world, we call it earth care. And again, it's just a contraction of all of those SDGs, all of those ideas, all those aspirations. So the first ethic in permaculture is earth care. And that means recognizing that we're on a living planet, recognizing that we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, we're exchanging molecules with the soil, with the trees, the plants, constantly. And that if we, by forgetting that and overlooking that, we're imperiling everything else. So can we build consensus around earth care? Can we all agree that by coming into the permaculture mindset, we're aspiring to have a more productive, a more regenerative, thoughtful and harmonious relationship with the living world? Okay. The second ethic then is people care. Can we behave, can we form a consensus between us now about we're interested in how we impact on other people, that we want to have a compassion and ability to wish to engage with other people and to be inclusive, because it's in our own selfish interest to do that. And so the third thing is which it's about meeting our own needs and reinvesting surplus. So we summarize that as fair share. I think it's more slightly just having, it's more than fair share, but it's a way of remembering it. So you get the nice little memorable thing: earth care, people care, fair share. Those are the permaculture ethics. But really this third one, the fair share thing, is about meeting our needs and making sure there's a surplus for reinvestment to complement the system, the bigger picture. Yep. Okay. So there we go. Economy, society, nature. That it relates to that. Earth care, people care, fair share. That's how David Holmgren likes to draw it. And again, it's an easy way. It's a simple pattern that helps us to remember something that's actually complicated. And what we're very, very interested in permaculture are these overlaps where we can create mutually beneficial relationships. If we can achieve, with every bit of resource that we use, can we achieve multiple outcomes? Can we have multiple benefits? So again, within design, we can be really efficient. We can be really smart about how we go about things, so that we can not just benefit ourselves, we can benefit other people and the environment at the same time. And I think if this stacking, this layering of functions, that's another word we'll use quite a lot in the course, is again, very much what we're trying to do in permaculture. By using design, we're trying to be smart and we're trying to be proactive to create very positive outcomes in the world. But positive outcomes in the world, which also benefit us. Okay, so, oh, I did that in exactly an hour. Wow, that's okay. That's kind of almost like I planned it. Which I did, of course. Yeah, okay. What else was I gonna? We can take a short break sometimes, but I'll just maybe just do a couple more things I wanted to look at. So I need to introduce you to stop share, new share, Dropbox, share. Okay. I will introduce you to this Dropbox, and I will invite you if you have your email addresses, I can bring you into this folder, which is PDC resources, and I have arranged the resources into days. I don't always follow the same order, so but you'll notice that there's a day 0, which is preparation before the course. So if you're interested, you might want to come back and have a look in here. And there's some very good resources in here to look at. Here's your permaculture ethics little graphic to help you remember. And in preparing for thinking about permaculture, we're also thinking about change. We're also bringing on board, oops, there we go, what's this one? Oh. No, it's because it's a PNG file. Sorry, I don't want to do that. Get out of that. Okay, I'll talk about climate change in a minute. Okay, there's some just a few little things in here to get us going.
Hanson, welcome to the Elephant. Glad to be here. Can you tell me what you're doing in Paris? How is your conference going so far? Yeah, well, I hope
my
to
mouse.
make clear that what the politicians seem to be talking about.
Okay, there's a little interview there with James Hanson about climate change. And there's a couple of other things I've put in here, which are videos which you might want to look at. One is In Grave Danger of Falling Food. It's very scratchy, grainy video with not good sound. And it's an interview with Bill Mollison. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think that it really gets your interest going in permaculture. And it also gives you a flavor of Bill. He was an extraordinary guy. Bill Mollison died in 2016, that year, didn't we, when so many important people died. Bill passed away in 2016. He was in his early 80s. He lived a very full life and kind of, job done. Well done, Bill. And it's great to hear him talk. He was a larger than life character who was quite mischievous, quite cheeky. People who know him call him a prickly pioneer. Those first tough, shrubby species that might colonize a new environment. They're usually quite tough and a bit spiky. And sometimes the pioneering people are a bit like that too. So as much as he was a big, warm, cuddly sort of bear of a person, but also really quite sharp in his work, his thinking and his analysis. And I think that over time, the testament of the genius of this book is slowly revealing itself. And that's sort of his sort of life work. Bill was born in Tasmania. He lived his life in Australia. He was a forester. He started out as a working in felling trees actually, and then he became more and more interested in the ecology of the forest. He decided to stop cutting down trees, and he started to study ecology. And eventually ended up as a lecturer at the University of Hobart, I think. University. And then he committed what was an absolutely sacrosanct crime in academia, and so he was kind of flung out or left because he tried to create a way of thinking that was cross-disciplinary. In academia, everything gets broken down into quite narrow fields. Permaculture is this vast, sort of vista of overlapping things. So he departed from the world of academia, having worked with one of his students, David Holmgren, to create the first book, which is called Permaculture 1. Oh, if I just go back, here is at the top of the Dropbox, you'll find books, and in there is I've tried not to put too much stuff in there. Actually, I've tried to give to keep it narrow, but there's some really great introduction text there, and there's nothing better really than to read. A really good way into permaculture is to read One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka, who was a Japanese rice farmer who, when sort of agricultural technology came into Japan, they started planting fields and using enhanced varieties. Fukuoka, his instinct was to not do that, was to stay with the traditional way. And as all of his neighbors started to become more and more mechanized, he was sort of pushed to come up with an explanation more of why he wasn't following in the footpaths of technology. And One Straw Revolution is that book really, and it's not scientific, it's more poetic, to be honest, but it somehow it has a reverence for nature, and you get from that this idea of him allowing himself to be informed and taught by the natural world. So it's a wonderful book, and I'll come back and reference this as well, and also I can put other texts in here. But sometimes I try not to overload people with too much information. So there we are, and day one, change. These 12 principles that David gave us are like the hours of a clock. It starts at 12 midday and goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then back to 1 again. It's an endless cycle. So with permaculture, we begin and end with principle 12, which is about change. It's about the fact that the world never stays the same, and that the only thing that we can be certain of, the only constant in life, is change. So let me just go to new share. Sorry, just share screen. This one. So I will introduce you to David's 12 principles. We're just going to look at principle 12 for now. And what we can say is, okay, they have a number. That's interesting. And the implication of that is that these principles have a sequence, they have an order. You can encounter them individually, and that's interesting. Sometimes you can kind of draw one at random and see whether it creates useful thoughts or not. But really, I like to see it as a sequence, and a sequence that begins and ends with change. And David introduces each of his 12 principles with a statement, a saying, something a bit more poetic, a symbol or an icon, and then also kind of an expansion of that, an exploration of that. These words are my summary of David Holmgren's words. So I've worked on this. So we start with the number 12, the statement: creatively use and respond to change. Okay, what might that mean? That if we fight forever, continually, if you like, trying to struggle to keep things the same, often we're fighting against change. We're trying to keep things as they are, and it's ultimately always going to be a losing battle. So I think, to me, the analogy is if change is like a wave, then what we're trying to do in permaculture is to surf that wave. We're trying to use the energy of that to propel us forward, to know that change always creates new opportunities. Change is a transformation. Change is an ability to adapt to constantly changing circumstances is what drives us forward. So, and the saying is see things for what they can be, not what they are. So if you just see an empty field and go, well, as an empty field, I don't see any potential there, you're failing to see, to use your creativity to go to see the steps that you might use to convert that empty field into a food forest, or into a garden, or into whatever, something, a wildlife haven or something. So it's encouraging you to see potentials, to see not things as they are, but as they could be, as they will be, as they can be. So so permaculture is a creative process. We're trying to engage with your creative thoughts. How can we see the world? Let's see it for its potential, not for its shortfalls. It's very, very easy to mire yourself in the negatives. There's so much kind of nasty, horrible stuff going on. And it seems that the media only wants to tell you about the nasty, horrible stuff. They very, very rarely tell you about the amazing energies that are moving in the other direction. So as much as we're seeing terrifying things happening in the world at the moment, I see those all as part of a great cycle of change. We're at the end of an economic paradigm. We're at the end of the oil age. We're at the end of a sort of militaristic domineering phase. And how do we know that? We know that because none of those things are sustainable. You cannot sustain the unsustainable. It's in its own sort of definition. We're constantly trying to roll rocks uphill or pump water uphill. It takes a continual effort. And as soon as you stop that effort, the system breaks down. So let's understand as well that there are counter forces, very positive forces in the world too. And in permaculture, we're trying to align ourselves with that to create a way forward. So we can say, and the icon, the picture, is a butterfly. And obviously the butterfly, possibly a moth, embodies the idea of transformation. You know, what looks like a little grub, a little caterpillar, can evolve, and it can transform itself into a very different thing. Or, you know, it's about seeing potential. And also, something quite amazing happens when a caterpillar goes into its chrysalis. It doesn't just have like little buds that sprout wings and it's now a caterpillar with wings. It actually almost dissolves into a molecular soup inside its chrysalis and completely reconfigures itself as a different thing. Well, there's a metaphor. There's a very powerful metaphor. Can we do that for ourselves? Can we do that for our community? And can we do that for the living world? Can we metamorphosize into something vastly, I don't know, more interesting, more beneficial, more powerful? So this principle has two threads: designing to make use of change in a deliberate and cooperative way, and creatively responding or adapting to large-scale system change, which is beyond our control or influence. So there's a really important thought right there. There's some of the change that's going on around us is that we can engage with, and we can shape, and we can bring that into our own plans and designs. And there are other changes that are going on that there's nothing that we can do about. But we can move in relation to those things, realizing that that's what's happening. So very simple one might be, well, the seasons are changing. Now, you know, we're entering autumn and it'll be followed by winter. We can't change that, but we can know that and see the pattern of change and prepare for it. We can knit some woolly jumpers. We can add insulation to our house. We can make a store of food for the adversity of winter. So, but we can't stop there being winter. Okay, so there's different kinds of changes going on. The acceleration of ecological succession is the most common expression of this principle in permaculture. Okay, maybe I need to enlarge on that, but let's just say by ecological succession, we're talking about those processes that nature is doing naturally itself. And as permaculture designers, the best thing we can do is to just work with nature, but accelerate it. Can we speed it up? For example, we can use fast-growing, nitrogen-fixing trees to improve soil and to provide shelter and shade for more valuable, slow-growing food trees. This reflects an ecological succession process from pioneers to climate. I'll enlarge on that. Change, in whatever form it comes, is inevitable. Change is the one constant in life. Permaculture design is a way to successfully navigate the constantly shifting sands of time. Change can be frightening, destabilizing, and challenging, but it also represents a new opportunity. Permaculture challenges to embrace change and to apply learning to create ways forward that make best advantage of new conditions. So, for the very reason that things never stay the same, permaculture invites us to observe and interact to find creative ways to turn problems into solutions. Okay, that's me linking it back to the first principle. We'll look at that a bit more tomorrow. But there's our introduction to this idea of permaculture is about navigating through a constantly changing landscape. Yeah, hi.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point.
Yeah, I'll come on.
Yeah,
I'm going to have a break in a minute. Yeah. Okay. What else have we got in our Dropbox here? Okay, I'll put this in because it represents change. I think I'll just talk about this for a couple of minutes, and then let's have a short break and stretch our legs and come back, and then we'll come online. We'll have a bit of a chat and talk about hopes and expectations from this course. This is a piece of rock. This photo. I took this photo in the National Museum in Cardiff, and it is of a rock that is 3.57 billion years old. 3.57 billion years. That's old. That's actually very old. What's interesting about it is it's organic matter. This is a cross-section of a fossilized stromatolite, which is a kind of organism which actually is still alive. You still have them. We still have them. They're very strange things. It's a unicellular organism. But what it can do and how it changed the world, and most significantly, was the first organism that could take carbon dioxide. Because remember, planet Earth at the beginning was a CO2 environment. It didn't have, there wasn't any oxygen. And the oxygen on our planet was created, released, essentially, starting off by these organisms called stromatolites. And they began to appear 3.57 billion years ago. So this is one of the oldest organic rocks. And it's made out of, essentially, the carbon, take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, build the carbon into the structure of the organism, don't need the oxygen, throw that away. So there was a change that happened. It began happening 3.57 billion years ago that started to create an atmosphere on our planet, which allowed then things to oxidize energy, to burn things. You can't burn something in a vacuum. You can't burn something without oxygen. Burning is a process of oxidization. So you can't have multicellular complex life without oxygen, because there's no way you can get the energy to power your body. So the interesting thing would be that as life on Earth developed, the atmosphere started to develop. It started eventually, after some time, there was enough oxygen in the atmosphere then for more complex multicellular organisms then to start to exist. So we would not be here if it wasn't for this organic sludge of 3.57 billion years ago. So that's what I mean about change as an opportunity and change as something that other organisms move in relation to. I can see we have Lydia has just dialed in. So hi, Lydia. Great timing. We're just preparing to take a break, and we're just going to stop for 15 minutes. And then we're going to come back and we'll have a chat. And we can all introduce ourselves and talk about our what we hope to get from the course. So it's 10:21 now. Shall we agree? Is 15 minutes okay, or 20 minutes? Yeah, 15 minutes. I'll see you back then at 25 to 11. And yeah, see you in a minute. Thanks a lot for listening.